When I was a little kid, I would watch The Wizard of Oz over and over again. I don't even remember this, but my parents told me I used to watch it on loop on a VHS. I still have that VHS. And I've recently finished Wild at Heart, which is going to have a Criterion Collection release. This is my Region B with the little heart and the dagger through it, or the knife through it. Nicolas Cage, Laura Dern, and you hear so much about films like Mulholland Drive and Inland Empire, but I think Wild at Heart is as strong as anything David Lynch ever created. I think it's a zany, beautiful homage to The Wizard of Oz and to Westerns and to so many other different kinds of films. It's a terrific black comedy in its own right, maybe the best among his at black comedy. And the film just captivated me frame after frame. And it is everything that works about David Lynch and actually about Wizard of Oz in its own way, put together into one glorious package. But it is David Lynch at his most eccentric in a sense. The violence in the film can go way, way over the top at times, although the whole film isn't just violence. It's not really what it is. He picks these moments where the gratuitous violence is telling a point, a message. It's the right kind of satire that really lands on the screen and on the page, and sometimes the almost like deadpan, like even dad joke kind of humor really offsets that, and it just becomes this amazing kind of film that I just like. It just appeals to me from top to bottom. So what's it about? Well, if you look at mine here, my little Region Blu-ray, it's an erotic, violent, disturbing, blackly humorous road movie. In a twisted homage to The Wizard of Oz is the best way to put it. It's this guy who's breaking parole. He takes his younger girlfriend with him, and they go on the road and they just live life. They go on their own journey, like this yellow brick road. And there are so many allusions. There's an early one to The Wizard of Oz that has to do with like the idea of a brain and straw and the fires in this film, the idea of the flame, the burning desire, the burning everything, the flame imagery in here and everything that relates to it is so good. You know, you think about the flames in The Wizard of Oz and how they're menacing and terrifying, and Dorothy's scared to death with the witch with the fire off of the broom. In this film, the flame is very inviting and mysterious, a call to action, a dangerous, foreboding sense that something could be ahead of you that's no good, but you can't resist it. You can't help it. I recently finished both Breaking Bad in May, and then a few months later we watched Better Call Saul, and it very much reminds me of that energy, this idea that you can't stop going forward with terrible decisions because that flame entices you. So like I said, whereas in Wizard of Oz, you know, it's scarier and downright terrifying, I think in this film it's more inviting. And David Lynch, as he so often does in his films, he almost deconstructs all of the mythology concerning like small town America. At least that's what I think of when I think of something like Blue Velvet. This film takes some of the ideas of The Wizard of Oz and certainly nods to them and is appreciative of them and never disrespectful to that film, but does turn them on their head a little bit because, for example, if you think about The Wizard of Oz and all of the relatives that are helpful to Dorothy, right, and they actually become sort of different characters when she's in her dream or whatever you want to think of that as. In this film, family can be quite terrifying and downright awful to be around. And so there is a warning that I have for you if you haven't seen this film. This film deals with some extremely, incredibly difficult subject matter, as many David Lynch films often do. And the family can be just about as awful as anything or those close to us. But it's not an illistic kind of film. I think the film has a lot of hope for humanity, but do be aware of that. And some of the black comedy along those lines is really, truly pushing the envelope just about as far as it can, okay? This is some of his most daring work in my mind in those terms. Now, the cast, like Nicolas Cage, if there was ever on this earth a role that Nick Cage was born to play, it was Sailor. Like, it takes advantage of his just good acting chops, his good comedy, good timing, but also like his eccentricity, because this is like a role that I feel like he was born to play. He's this pseudo Elvis character who's also just kind of a deadbeat in his own right, but a little bit philosophical, a really layered, nuanced character for something that's, you know, what the anchor point of a long form black comedy. And there's a scene in here, one of my favorite scenes in this film, where like there's a band in the background and they stop playing and they kind of look like maybe they're a hair band or something. And they're just sort of, reverent to him doing this like Elvis spiel. He's always kind of, the whole film goes back to Elvis over and over, and you'll kind of see that in some of his actions and words and dialogue. It's amazing how that part is worked in as well. Harry Dean Stanton, I think, is very important in this film. He's great in many films. This is my second favorite performance I've personally seen from him. Of course, my favorite being Paris, Texas, which is one of the best films in the Criterion Collection and one of the greatest films of all time. But I really like how he kind of brings some of the zaniness of this film back down just a little bit and helps anchor it some, like his deadpan expressions. He says more with his eyes. There's a part where his mouth's covered. He says more with his eyes than I ever could on the stage if I were to play Richard III, okay, and not Hamlet in a Shakespeare production. Like, this is incredible acting from him. As always, William Dafoe plays a character that's similar to others that he's played, although there's a terrifying scene with him and Laura Dern that I thought was executed as well as anything else in the film. I mean, because it has so many good... Gosh, there are these transitions in this film that blew my mind. These fading transitions. And just like, there was this scene that I wrote down also. So there's the two are in bed against each other, like one side to the other, and then the flames come. There's images of flames, and there's a story, and that story builds exposition, and it gives you kind of layers to the characters. And then we cut to a shot of like this almost vertical looking shot of a cigarette, and often we'll see like the cigarette burn down, and that is part of that youth and that adventure and that spirit and that flame, and all these images just work together so well. And another thing I thought while I was watching, this movie feels like infinitely wide. I don't know what he did with the aspect ratio. Those of you who know that technical part of it, you can please tell me in the comments. But this film felt like There Will Be Blood, but wider. I mean, it was just like I couldn't process how much he was packing into the image using that aspect ratio, and it's just like I just thought it was just like overwhelming sometimes. And again, the whole thing is just really funny, but it's very cinematic. And sometimes you know what I think, and I wrote this down, like with David Lynch, he'll take on these like bizarre, spicy sequences, right? Or he'll deal with stuff that just feels a little bit off kilter, and I think sometimes it's easy to downplay how brilliant that is cinematically. Just because it's emotional or intimate doesn't mean it can't be cinematic. Cinematic doesn't have to be limited to dead seriousness and a lack of color and these like, these plain, boring tones. Like, this is the kind of stuff that is even harder, I think, to do than, say, like an effective black and white drama, right, from the 60s or 70s. This is really innovative filmmaking. And when I was watching this at some point, and I can't remember exactly when it hit me, the message that I took away, and that I take away at having watched the film, there is something inside of all of us that's adventurous, and no matter how adventurous, the extent of the event, our own adventurous attitude or outlook, there's something inside of us that wants to connect with a greater culture. Wizard of Oz, Elvis, whatever it is. And sometimes we feel like we're lost on this highway. That's another film, Lost Highway, another great David Lynch film. And we're just out there, and we're just sort of exploring and throwing spaghetti on the wall, something I talk about, where you just don't know what you're doing. And that this film is wild at heart in that sense. It's exploring and maybe not really getting anywhere and barely learning, as you go and making mistakes. But ultimately, it's because we want to connect to something better, something even more optimistic. I mean, there's a scene in here where Laura Dern makes him turn off the radio because she can't take it anymore. Oh, it's depressing news. And then they have this like Gone with the Wind moment by the road. I could go on and on about how much I love this film and everything I thought that was great about it, but I am finding that whenever I watch a David Lynch film, this is typically how I feel. And so if you haven't checked out my other videos, I have a whole David Lynch playlist. Of course, I was originally sort of turned on to his films by his performance in The Fabelmans, where he played John Ford, who's directed The Searchers behind me. So I just really admire this film. I'm glad I'm glad it's entering the Criterion Collection. And I've got my Region B copy, but you all will have to let me know your thoughts on the film if you found any of the conversation today to be helpful. Let me know. I did not point out a lot of the Wizard of Oz parallels because I want you to find those as you go. There are, you'll get the witch, you'll see the witch, the good witch, the bad witch. You'll see all of that in there. You'll see a few other iconic sites and so forth from the film and references. But let me know your favorite in the comments, and click that like button and subscribe to Cody in the Cinema.